Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Debrief. This week, it's an eventful week at the Vatican in the days leading up to the Synod. Then we'll talk about Cardinal Fernandez publishing not one but two responses to the Dubia regarding Pope Francis' teaching. And then third, tomorrow, the Vatican will release a new apostolic exhortation by Pope Francis on the climate crisis. Hey, Mike.
Whoa, here we are. How you doing?
Good, I'm good. How are you?
Good.
So we delayed a day because yesterday was Dubia Day. 30-second overview on that before we dive in.
Yeah, so basically, early in the morning, we had two sets of Dubia, new Dubia, released by Cardinal Burke, who's one of the Dubia Cardinals 1.0 from 2016. He and Cardinal Brandmuller, who was another one, and three new cardinals issued two sets of Dubia to the Pope this summer, and it was published yesterday. And then another cardinal had another Dubia. And anyway, it was hectic. That was the Dubia is my issue. Like everything surrounding that, including in the first one. So it was sort of a lot of riches and a lot of frustration, but I sort of I felt compelled because the responses to the Dubia weren't in English when they were first released. I wanted to get the information to the people. So thank you for your patience to our viewers, our listeners, and most of all to my sidekick, my partner in debriefing, I guess. Dominic.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So yes, friends, welcome to the Debrief. It's our weekly show where we're talking about news, questions, and controversies facing the Catholic Church. I'm Dominic D'Souza, founder of Smart Catholics.
And I'm Mike Lewis, the co-founder and editor of the website wherepeteris.com.
So first on the menu today, we're talking about new cardinals and pre-gaming on the upcoming synod. So we've been talking about this in the last couple of months. So on Saturday, Pope Francis created 21 new cardinals from 16 nations. And this brought the total number of cardinals in the college to 242 members from 91 countries, of whom 137 are under the age of 80 and have the right to vote in the next conclave. Any highlights that you can share on this?
Yeah, I mean, basically, this was the first event in a sequence of pre-synod events in the church, beginning with these new cardinals. Pope Francis issued his homily to them was on the subject of synodality. And the image that he used throughout during his homily was that the College of Cardinals is called to resemble a symphony orchestra representing the harmony and the synodality of the church. So that was an interesting message there. And but yeah, it sort of had the energy of like, okay, things are going to get rolling.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the synod on the Amazon, I think was precluded by a group of new cardinals as well.
Okay, so we discussed some of the big names among the new cardinals in the past. Do you have any other comments about the new crop of cardinals?
Really, just once again, I want to congratulate Cardinal Christophe Pierre. Going to have to get used to that because Archbishop Pierre is something that I've been invoking ever since the beginning of Where Peter Is and on the Debrief. So just very happy for him and congratulations to him. He is the apostolic nuncio to the United States, and he's originally from France. And I think that he has done a great job of trying to convey Pope Francis's message in the United States. The only other thing, and I didn't see it brought up by anybody else, but this was actually the first conclave or consistory. This was the first consistory in the Pope Francis era in which the new cardinals didn't take a trip to visit Pope Emeritus Benedict. He passed away on December 31st of last year, and this was the first consistory. Since then, it had become a tradition for, even as he aged and grew older and older, but for the new cardinals to come visit, greet, pray with, and accept the the wisdom of the Pope Emeritus. And so it was a loss, I think, that was likely felt by Pope Francis and by other members of the College of Cardinals who were named in the last 10 years. And I certainly felt it. Um, Obviously, it's a ritual that can only be done, has only been a possibility during Francis's papacy. But I hope that in the future, if another pope resigns, this type of sign of respect is shown to the predecessor of the new pope.
Beautiful. Thank you. Anything else from the past few days?
Yeah. So the other thing is, following this consistory, the participants in the synod started a period of prayer and reflection, um, almost a retreat atmosphere. Pope Francis has he tabbed the former head of the Dominicans, an English priest, Timothy Radcliffe, to lead the reflections, to lead the conferences in advance of this synod. And unfortunately, we haven't posted anything about them on Where Peter Is, but I've read several of them, and they're actually really beautiful reflections. And they help us understand what it means to be a synodal church, what it means to listen, what it means to let go of ideology and attachments. And I think that's the key to a successful synod. So hopefully, sometime within the next few days, we'll have a little feature with links to this for Where Peter Is. But when people say that the synod is not a parliament, but it's a way of just existing as a church, this is exactly what they were talking about. These ideas, these concepts that Father Radcliffe is sharing. So we'll provide links to them, but in the show notes. But I definitely want to encourage people to read these reflections.
So, speaking of the church not being a parliament, but the synodality being a way of life, we've got one of our cardinals, Cardinal Victor Fernandez, prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. He had a busy day yesterday. He posted 2 documents on the DDF website, both of which were responses to Dubia submitted by cardinals, asking questions about Pope Francis' teaching. One of them was a response to Cardinal Raymond Burke and 4 other cardinals who submitted a set of dubia, or doubts, to Pope Francis, seeking clarification on points of doctrine and discipline ahead of the Synod on Synodality at the Vatican. So you also had a busy day yesterday, just trying to keep up. Can you discuss this response and then provide some context?
Yes. So let me just give you an overview of the day. And actually, Michael Lofton at Reason and Theology gave a pretty good rundown of this. It all started early in the morning when Cardinal Raymond Burke, who is an outspoken critic of Pope Francis, posted on his website. And what he posted were 2 sets of dubia. One of them was submitted by himself, Cardinal Brandmuller, Cardinal Zen, Cardinal Sarah, and I believe Cardinal Sandoval, who is from Mexico. These were questions about synodality, divinely revealed truth, the possibility of women's ordination, or the possibility of some kind of blessing of same-sex unions being possible in the church. And what he did not publish was the response that was issued by Pope Francis on July 11th. So let's get this straight. Back in 2016, these cardinals, Cardinal Burke and 3 others, submitted dubia regarding the apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia. Now, the way that these questions were framed, it was sort of setting up a false dichotomy. They were posed as yes/no questions, but within those questions were assumptions and assertions and words that were open to different interpretations. And there was an accompanying letter that says, if Pope Francis answers yes to dubia number 1, then it could mean this error, or this error, when none of those 3 errors were a possibility. It would have required a long, well thought out response that would have had to take into account all of these contingencies. anyway, so, but their argument was this is traditional, this is yes, no questions. Usually when people send dubia to the Vatican, whether they go to the Dicastery for Worship or the interpretation of pontifical texts or the DDF or the Pope himself, which is somewhat unorthodox to have the Pope answer these types of questions, they're open-ended questions. They're looking for the people who submit them, whether they are bishops, lay people, theologians, pastors. These questions are looking for a response. Am I supposed to do this or am I supposed to do that? I remember during COVID, one of the bishops in his diocese, he actually set out a rule that if you were going to receive communion during this part of COVID, you could only receive in the hand. Now, canon law says to some degree that it's the right of the faithful to receive on the tongue, but given the extraordinary circumstances, that's what he decided. So one of the members of his diocese, one of the faithful, wrote a dubium to the Vatican, and it was they got a response from the Congregation for Divine Worship saying that in this extraordinary circumstance, what the bishop did is allowable. So that's an answer. Now, this individual presumably received a response. This bishop received a response. The individual did not identify him or herself, but the bishop, of course, having this official response from the Vatican, posted this on the website. It was flashed out on social media. There's an official response. So you can see kind of the dichotomy. If you get the answer you want, you're going to wave that in front of everyone. If you don't get the answer you want, you kind of let that slide. I know another theologian who submitted a dubium to the DDF years ago and received a polite response that essentially said, thank you very much for the work that you do in this area. This is not something we're going to respond to. That's not something generally you will advertise. But what these cardinals were doing, what they did back in 2016 and what they did again, was that they wanted a particular response from the Pope. They wanted to set a trap. They wanted to set a false dichotomy. When Jesus was asked, is it faithful to pay taxes, or I forget the exact, he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and render unto God what's God's. Didn't answer the question directly. A lot of times answered in parables. Because of the way that the questions were laid out, Pope Francis did not acknowledge them, did not reply to them. There's actually a possibility that he didn't receive them because Cardinal Caffarra confirmed that he delivered it to the Pope's residence, but they didn't receive, to my knowledge, any official confirmation that the Pope had seen them or that the Pope was declining. And the Pope said the first time he heard about it was in the news the day that they published these dubia and said that they hadn't received a response. Long story. Okay, so that's dubia. That's how they're supposed to work and how these cardinals were trying to make it work. So they submit this dubia on this new set of dubia on July 10th. July 11th, they promptly get a response from the Pope, signed by the Pope on these questions. And the very first question had to do with the dogma and divine revelation. And they asked, can it change? I don't have the text in front of me, but essentially what Pope Francis said in his reply was that it depends on what you mean by change. Obviously there are eternal truths that can't be touched that are part of divine revelation, but in terms of doctrinal development, the gospel is being continually revealed to us. It's being refreshed to us anew. He brought up how past magisterial teachings and even scripture seem to tolerate slavery, but the magisterium over the years has shifted on the question, and basically the magisterium has grown and developed, And the official position of the churches is that the magisterium is now even more closely in alignment with divine revelation, with the gospel, with the message of Christ. So anyway, each of these questions, he provides an answer that says, well, if you mean this, then this. But what I'm trying to say is yada, yada, yada. Well, because he didn't provide one-word answers, this same group of cardinals issued a reworded, reformulated version of these dubia questions. Now, what that reveals to me is that they perhaps aren't interested in hashing out the nuances, and they are trying to box in the Pope, trying to box in the movement of the Holy Spirit in the church. It's pretty cheeky, especially since the big outcry last time was that he didn't respond at all. Instead, this time, he provides within 24 hours a thorough and complete and nuanced and theologically rich response to their questions, and for them to just sort of brush them aside and not even quote directly from his responses in issuing a new response or a new set of dubia saying, no, we want you to answer only with yes or no, doesn't seem to fit in with any kind of mature theological discussion. Within an ecclesial setting, we can talk about possibilities. Now, whether something's promulgated officially as doctrine, that's the job of the magisterium to decide. But if they don't like something that's being discussed, and the funny thing is, within that particular response on July 11th, he said, you're decrying synodality, but what you're doing right here, you want to, well, he presumed they wanted to engage, they wanted to challenge the theology of these subjects, and they just wanted to shut it down. And I think this is what Pope Francis is talking about. So this is what happened, though. Cardinal Burke posts the two sets of dubia, but he did not post the response from the Pope. So from what he's posted that they're unsatisfied with the Pope's response. From the second set, you can read what their issues were or how they interpreted his response, but they didn't let you read from the Pope themselves. And early on, they were telling journalists that it was a private letter to them, so it was inappropriate to publish this. Well, on September 25th, Cardinal Fernandez had an audience with Pope Francis in his role as prefect for the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. And he brought with him those dubia from Pope Francis, and he asked if it would be possible to make these responses public. And Pope Francis signed it and said yes. So after Cardinal Burke posts the two sets of dubia, then Cardinal Fernandez posts his responses on the website for the DDF, the official Vatican website. But he wrote the responses, or his letter and Pope Francis's responses were in Spanish. It was a scanned document. It was a little bit skewed. The language was a little theological. Well, as soon as that was brought to my attention, my day was caught up in, we need to get an English translation of this up ASAP, just to, quell any fires or anything like that. So I'm a monoglot, but, I only speak English, and it was a scanned document, but between various OCR programs and deskewing programs and, reformatting things, because there was, when it turns into a PDF, there's a hard return at the end of every line. So I cleaned up the formatting, reproduced the formatting from the scan, uploaded it to the DeepL translator, ran through it, looked for weird typos and weird wording, just tried to clean it up. I hadn't even read it at this point. So we're talking about, yes, it's a machine translation, but I wasn't trying to impose my own ideology. I just wanted to get something up there that was hopefully 90% accurate, that so that the usual suspects wouldn't go into a tizzy.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and so it went viral, people were referring to it, clicking on it. About an hour or two later, Cardinal Burke's website suddenly has 2 documents or 3 documents instead of 2. It's not just Dubia 1 and Dubia 2, it's Dubia 1, Francis's response, and Dubia 2. His response had been translated into 8 languages. So in other words, they were sitting on it, and if the Vatican hadn't released it, they were going to try to keep it from the public eye.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they claim that it would have been inappropriate, but I mean, they certainly weren't shy about publishing their own private letters to the Pope and then waiting to release them right before the Synod and I mean, I would think that it was in order to cause as much of a mess as possible. But so anyway, and then towards the end of the day, the Vatican published in Vatican News a provisional translation. Now, I have not yet looked at Cardinal Burke's group's translation. Since the Vatican has provided a translation, I would recommend looking at that one or visiting Where Peter Is. We have a big link to the original one at the top, or to the Vatican one at the top, but you can read what the machine, I don't know, maybe the machine is a Vatican spy or something like that, but you can, if you want to read ours, it's legible, it's readable, but it's, the Vatican one, I guess, is now
it's the
more
official
official.
one. Yeah. So there was a second set of Dubia with answers provided by Cardinal Fernandez yesterday, and the topic was Amoris Laetitia. Can you tell us about that one?
Yes. So because Cardinal Burke was the one who started the firestorm, and presumably Cardinal Fernandez was just waiting for, obviously we've seen this happen again where Burke or other critics of Pope Francis will drop a surprise manifesto or open letter. The first Dubia situation caught the Vatican flat-footed. I think, Cardinal Mueller, who was the prefect of the CDF at the time, I don't even think he understood Amoris Laetitia very well, so I don't know that he would have done a good job at responding to the Dubia if he tried. But so this, but then what was released, this second document, so 2 documents on the DF website, only one of which got a huge amount of press, was another set of Dubia by one cardinal this time, Cardinal Dominic Duka. He's the Archbishop Emeritus of Prague. He sent a series of questions about Amoris Laetitia, which, as you may remember, is the same topic of the unanswered Dubia. These questions were more open-ended. Does this passage imply that we're supposed to do this? What are the regulations? Can different dioceses and priests set different standards? It seemed to me that his approach was cynical, and I've heard he's very right-wing, very conservative, not a fan of Pope Francis, but it seemed to me that his questions, at the very least, were procedural. They were, please answer this because I'm hearing this and this. Like, different countries have different policies. Can one diocese ban communion for all divorced and remarried while another one has to allow it? Like, these questions, based on the rhetoric, based on the confusion that Amoris Laetitia's critics and a lot of pundits have put forward about it, these questions are understandable. And Cardinal Fernandez, basically the gist, and once again, posted that on Where Peter Is in English translation. I'm not aware of an official Vatican translation, but if there is, I will link to it and you can read it. But basically what he said is this is a pastoral approach. It's not about rules. It's about a pastor who's well-formed, who cares about the salvation and the welfare of this person whose life is in this situation that's not in line with the ideal, not in line with church teaching, and that priests should provide pastoral accompaniment to each person and help them discern the path forward. Discern, am I in a state of mortal sin? Am I sinning culpably, or am I in a situation where I want to get out, but it's difficult because I have pressures, internal, external? Will the sacraments help this person in their journey of faith? Obviously, if you are in a state of mortal sin, like subjectively, you've committed a sin with full knowledge, full consent, and it's grave matter, you should not present yourself for communion. A lot of people have difficulty, though, discerning whether or not, because, I mean, people always say holding a gun to your head, but maybe there's pressure. You won't be able to provide for your children. You have a huge sense of shame that you're working through. Like, are you fully culpable for a mortal sin in these situations? And so the pastor's job is to help you discern honestly, openly. We're not trying to pull something over on God or on the church or create scandal, but it's really, can this person go to confession? Like, can we absolve them? Can we admit them to communion? Because we're not talking about the law in the church is that they are to be denied communion just based on the situation.
Mhm.
It's not about whether they want to go or not. Now, plenty of people, I'm sure, go to communion without examining themselves at all. But we're talking about people who really want to get their lives right with the church. They're going to the priest. They're in these difficult situations. And let's discern where you are, where the ideal is, where your spiritual life is, what kind of progress you're making. And so
Yeah.
these are the kinds of responses. I don't know if Cardinal Duka will understand these responses or how he'll feel about them, but I do want to commend him because the date that he sent it, and I don't know, this is speculation. I have no inside knowledge, but he submitted these on July 13th. And the other cardinals submitted theirs on July 10th. The timing of this is interesting to me. Why would Cardinal Duca have the idea to submit Dubia to the Holy Father? Well, I'm wondering if he was asked by Cardinal Burke or some of these other cardinals to take part in their Dubia. And I mean, just sort of my charitable thought, or maybe the at least the example that this shows, whether it was intentional or not, is that he went about it the right way. He went about it by submitting it individually, and
Mhm.
didn't, and it was the DDF. It was Cardinal Fernandez who published this Dubia. It wasn't him making some kind of scene.
Right, right. So, to that point, much was made of the fact that Pope Francis didn't respond to the first set of Dubia back in 2016. Why do you think a response was given to Cardinal Duca?
Well, like I said, I think that it was the proper way of doing it. He was doing it in a sense of, hey, I've got this question. I'm confused. Please tell me how to proceed. And I think that's something that is truly missing from, especially from that first set of Dubia in 2016. Now, I talked about the very first question on the Dubia, where it was sort of like a trap. It's if you answer yes, they think you're a heretic. If you answer no, then basically you've renounced what you just taught. It put the Pope in a hard place based on all of their assumptions. Um, and I think it shows the why it was prudent not to answer. And then I think the behavior once they received an answer, a thorough answer, like, to
Mhm.
me, it would make more sense if they published I don't know, a video, not a video, but well, maybe a video or a written reflection on his
Mhm.
comments. This still causes us problems because there could be this or there could be that, rather than just looking at the format. We wanted a yes or no, and you didn't give us one, so he explained why a yes or no answer couldn't be given to these questions, and yet they're still persisting. Like, what do they want? I think what they want is to cause discord. They want to erase Pope Francis's teaching. And I think that by responding, he did a great job. And I don't, and once again, the yes, no questions and insisting on the yes, no. Well, if you can't answer that, you can't answer that. So they're not going to get a response. I don't expect it anyway, because no answer. They want the game in according to their rules. They want it according to their framework. And when the Pope challenges that framework, all they do is reconstruct the framework so that it still matches what they want. So that's it just kind of shows different approaches to the way that the church operates.
Yeah. Well, speaking of challenging frameworks, the apostolic exhortation Laudate Deum by Pope Francis is set to be released tomorrow. It's been described as part 2 of Laudato Si, and it will address environmental issues and especially the climate crisis. Anything more you can share about it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty incredible. So the pregame for the for Laudate Deum is or for the synod is, it begins with the consistory and the new cardinals, and then it ends on the feast of Saint Francis with the apostolic exhortation Laudate Deum. It's expected to address several environmental issues. Pope Francis has described it as an update to Laudato Si because some issues have become more and more pressing. One of the themes that I've seen in some of the pre-document discussions has been a culture of abandonment. So we'll see what that means. Or maybe because people are abandoned because of the because of the conditions they live in, or they're neglected. It's expected to cover the misuse of natural resources, the need for us to return to a proper use of nature, as well as just the impact of environmental degradation and neglecting the environment, the way that we treat others, especially those who live with fewer resources. So, and my understanding is that it will emphasize practical actions that can that we can take that can help the environment, such as solar panels or the use of renewable energy. And I believe it is going to probably challenge a lot of U.S. Catholics as well. My understanding, and I don't know, but this is the buzz, that it will emphasize all the more, because really, if you read Laudato Si, it was about integral ecology and ecological conversion and the interconnectedness of everything. It gave some practical principles about respect for environment, but I believe, based on what I'm hearing, that Laudate Deum will re-emphasize the importance of responding to climate change, which I know that there are a lot of people in, especially in the US, but it's an issue in other parts of the world, who don't believe that humans are responsible for our warming climate. So it'll be interesting. There'll probably be some things about the economy and government responsibility that will be that I'm sure will receive a reaction. And depending on how things go, because there are a lot of things going on in the church right now, I would expect a backlash. That's my prediction anyway. I don't know.
And that's why this show will probably never be out of a job, and we'll always need some sort of debriefing each week. So thank you, Mike. Thanks for the debrief.
Thank
Friends,
you.
we've got links to all of these. I say we. Mike does the incredible work every week of putting links to these in the description. The conversation is brought to you from smartcatholics.com. It's the free online community for millennials, creators, and learners. Join the private Where Peter Is group to ask questions, share insights, and suggest topics for next time.
And visit wherepeteris.com to read articles, commentaries, and reflections by and for faithful Catholics who support the mission and vision of Pope Francis.
Please share this episode with family, friends, or followers. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button so that you never miss an episode of the Debrief.
And please help support Where Peter Is on Patreon. to help us continue to bring wonderful programming like this.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks again, friends, for joining us. When it comes to news and controversies in the Catholic Church, stay curious, informed, and engaged. God bless you.